All right, so welcome everyone. This is the Creator Good Podcast. This is the official introduction of a new variety podcast that's dedicated to the major events and topics of today that range from theology to entertainment to science, culture, history, and the supernatural. It's all examined with an objective lens and a biblical zeal for truth. All right, so since this is an introduction, I thought I'd give you a quick overview about the show. So, to start off, I think it's a fair question to ask. What's the show all about? Well, it's pretty obvious that the world in which we live today looks very different from how most would remember it some years ago. Given that it seems to be changing in many ways, there's still a huge percentage of the population that is either partially aware of what's really going on or they're still in the dark about things. Things that some would consider to be obscure or unimportant but have a much more significant impact than most could imagine. Most people by now, I think, are aware that the mainstream media isn't as reliable and truthful as they claim to be, and for the most part would never address some of these topics. There are even some podcasts, internet talk shows, and independent news outlets that still don't cover some of these topics. So this show is aimed at tackling subjects that have practically never been covered before, and those that have been widely discussed but with a more in-depth look. One example would be the national, or I'd say the international influence of the occult. There's plenty of podcasts that have discussed something about it. Anything ranging from what's actually shown to be true, or in some cases is still theoretical. But there are significant moments that occult societies and occultism itself have influenced and directed world history. Take for instance what's known as the Propaganda Due Lodge scandal of the 1980s. The mysterious death of an Italian banker whose connection to the Vatican Bank and a secret Freemasonic lodge forever changed and confirmed years of suspicion concerning the hidden intentions of esoteric societies. And this wasn't just a small group of ordinary individuals. This was a coordinated effort to subvert Italy's economy and government by a secret fraternity comprised of the biggest names in Italy's political system, secret service, military, economy, and more. In addition to that event, back in 1934, Franklin Roosevelt's VP William Wallace commissioned an overseas project in the Mongolian region to study drought-resistant plants for agricultural research. Now, given the fact that he was the Secretary of Agriculture at one point, a project like that really isn't out of place for him, and there really isn't anything noteworthy of attention. But surprisingly, it was meant to be a covert operation in which Wallace enlisted his close friend and spiritual mentor, the Russian mystic and painter Nicholas Roerich, to travel throughout that region of Mongolia and Tibet to spread and promote utopian propaganda as a means of uniting those regions in a spiritual coalition as a step toward a one-world government. For another example, let's take theology. There's a great deal of focus on the current view on Christianity. There seems to be everything surrounding it, from an extreme misunderstanding about it to the political and cultural subversion of it, and even an adding and removing of certain doctrinal aspects for the sake of combining it with other forms of mysticism and spirituality. So one of the main objectives of the show is to examine this phenomenon and render the truth of biblically sound theology in light of what is happening today. And those are just a few examples of some of the topics and stories we'll investigate here on the show. So I guess the next question would be, what motivated me to start the show? I never really wanted to start a podcast. I did have a lot of things I wanted to talk about and things I wanted to address through some kind of outlet, possibly. Just because I felt there was a need to inform people about some of the reasons behind various things going on. I'd say not only in American society, but I'd say the world in general. And I think given the number of independent news sources and other podcasts that kind of address the same sort of topics, I just felt like my voice would have been lost in the white noise of it all. I used to even joke with my family and other people I know that it seems like everyone and their grandma has a podcast these days. So, ultimately, I kind of felt like there was no point. I was starting to become upset and anxious at various things going on in the world. And, I needed some way of getting a lot of that stuff off my chest. So at one point, I can honestly say the only thing that brought about a solution for that was a moment of divine intervention. As far as having a spiritual belief, I am a Christian, and I was really seeking God's guidance and instruction for everything I was going through. So one day, to my surprise, he prompts my mom with the idea that I should start a podcast. I was really reluctant to even considering starting a podcast, but, she reminded me that the most important thing wasn't whether it was good enough to gain a popular status, but that it was really meant to be a vital source to inform people about relevant topics concerning the times we're in, and to, offer up truth, especially about biblical theology and, to anyone who is searching it out. Not to mention, I also want the material that will be presented in the show to also give a sense of hope and encouragement to anyone who feels troubled by what's taking place in the world. I think the final question to ask would be, what else can be expected from the show? Well, besides the investigative and analytical approach to the show, I also want to interview a wide range of people with their own unique perspectives and knowledge concerning some of the subjects we'll explore. And from time to time, I'll have the chance to interview people who do share the same faith as I do. I think for the sake of maintaining an objective view on some topics, I also want to interview those who don't believe the same thing as I do. Along with that, the podcast will include 2 separate segments that are meant to be more interactive with you guys, and will also, I'd say, lighten things up from time to time since I'll be covering some serious topics. One segment is called The Art Lounge. It's a live streamed event that will broadcast on YouTube, Twitch, and Discord, where I'll work on some kind of creative project where you guys can chime in to offer your advice, or if you just want to chat. The other segment, called Real Reviews, is where I'll do, like a review or a reaction to some kind of media, whether it's TV shows, maybe music or film, books, whatever. So if you want to check out all the things we'll be exploring and uncovering here on the show, just be sure to follow, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be updated every time there's a new episode. I appreciate you guys watching my little intro, and I hope to see you again here on The Creator Good.